station. This is Bobo FM.
The views and opinions expressed by the following program and its participants are solely their own opinions and do not represent the opinions of DMS Broadcasting and have no affiliation to the BBC.
At the Health Services Authority, we want to keep you informed about the latest developments that impact your health because your health matters to us. Join us each Friday and Saturday from 1 to 2 p.m. as we cover health news, offer advice, and answer your questions on Healthcare Today with HSA.
When you have a sports or fitness-related injury, trust the expertise of the HSA Sports and Exercise Medicine Clinic to get you back in the game. Our internationally trained and certified physicians specialize in sports traumatology, sports medicine, pain management, and orthopedic surgery. For treatment of common injuries such as tendonitis, arthritis, tennis elbow, rotator cuff, or knee tears, schedule a consultation with the Sports and Exercise Medicine Clinic at Smith Road Medical Center by calling 949-8600 or visit hsa.ky for more information.
All right, welcome to the show. It's Bobo. And we are happy to be here. Bobo 103.1. We just changed the dial recently. This is a show dedicated to all things HSA. We always go for 1 hour. We took a little bit of a hiatus break. We are happy to be back now. And I have a very special guest in the studio. I don't think you are a stranger to the country or to the healthcare division at all.
Not at all.
Go ahead and let them know who's behind that mic.
So my name is Faith Roches. Although a lot of people may know me by my maiden name, Faith Gaeley. I am a speech and language therapist. I've been one for the past, I want to say.
It's been a while, right?
It's been, I graduated in 2007.
Okay.
So what's that, like 18 years? I'm on my 18th. This is my 18th year.
Congratulations.
Of being a speech therapist. I'm officially an adult.
So I can say congrats because it's been a while since I've seen you, Faith. So I can say congratulations for two things: 18 years, almost to that 20, and also congratulations on changing your last name.
Oh, thank you. Yes, almost been married almost 3 years now.
Oh, that's good. It's an accomplishment. Is it still at a phase where I call marriage a roller coaster? Mm-hmm. So at one point I was at the phase where it was just continuously going up. We didn't drop yet, right? Because there's going to be a drop phase. It's like that terrible twos when you have kids, and you have that thing where the pastor said the good and the bad.
Yes.
And then you're going to experience the bad, and that's really what's going to test it. So where is it at right now? Is it like
I would say we're still on the up, but I also think we have the benefit of like life experience under our belts, and we're more I don't know what's the word, seasoned.
I love it.
Newlyweds.
Yes.
So we're not, we are comfortable and know who we are as people. And so I think this
is a good roller coaster.
Yeah. So I think our approach to marriage has really, really worked for us. So yeah, it's been good. Lots of ups.
This is the roller coaster I would get on.
Yes.
There's a lot I would not, but this one for sure.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's where we are right now. But Faith, thank you so much for being in the studio with us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to be interviewing you. And yes, you said it before, you are a speech language therapist. You've been that for a while, 18 years.
Yes, 18 years, 17 years with HSA.
I was going to ask if it was before.
And yes, so I've been with HSA a very long time.
Yeah.
So, and I am currently the team lead for speech and occupational therapy for HSA.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Definitely well deserved. Now, for those that don't know, speech therapy. What is your job? What do you do? When you wake up in the morning, what does your day-to-day look like?
Our day varies from day to day. I think a lot of times, particularly here in Cayman, in the past, I remember when I first came home, everybody was like, oh, so you just work with tie tongues and lisps and stutters. And it's that is actually such a small part of all of the things that we do. And that has been such a rewarding experience, is working with the physicians, with the community, with the public health nurses, with the schools, really just helping to amplify awareness about the breadth and depth of all that speech therapy is. So speech therapy works across the lifespan, and our team works across the lifespan. So we see anybody and everybody because we are the speech therapy team for the country's public health service, right? So as being part of Team HSA, we have put in the work to make sure that we are skilled and competent and culturally sensitive and respectful and just very knowledgeable on a wide range of issues. So from birth through end of life, we are there supporting patients. We do a wide range of actual like disorders that we work with.
Yeah.
So, but if you can group it, I would say it would be more like feeding and eating, so dysphagia and swallowing disorders and feeding disorders. We also do cognitive communication things. So if you think about language, for young children, we're looking more at language acquisition.
Yeah.
For adults, we are looking more at rehabilitation. You may have had those skills and now you've lost them due to a car accident or a brain injury or a stroke or a degenerative condition or cancer, like those types of things. And then we also help support speech sound disorders and fluency disorders. So that for a young child, that is now the lisp or, you know, what phonological processing disorders where I'm, you know, replace the phonology with some other types of sounds, which is making it difficult for me to be understood. On the flip side of that, from the adult side, again, I may have some type of disorder or acquired brain injury that has affected my motor movements of my articulators. And so then it's just working to help, you know, get back that speech intelligibility. And things like stuttering, voice disorders, so vocal nodules, you know, chronic hoarseness, vocal cord paralysis. And then you have those persons who may have other concerns. Maybe there's some hearing loss and they need some support with the language and communication due to that. Or there's persons who have limited ability to produce oral speech. So we would use alternative augmentative communication or AAC. So we'll use like apps, sign language, core boards, pictures, like really coming up with like total communication approaches to make sure that you can communicate. And so just remembering that every person may not always be able to communicate with their mouth, but there's a myriad of ways in which we can communicate, and that all communication is important, it's valid, and it should be honored. So it's a wide range of things that we do.
I love that.
Yeah.
Like how you just ended it. Like everyone should be valued.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how you communicate.
Exactly. And so I think, you know, you could see 10, 12 patients back to back that all have the same diagnosis, but every individual is unique. And because of the approach that we take at HSA, it's not a one size fits all. It's not like a rote program. Like we really try to use the evidence base, the cultural responsive care, as well as just personalizing it based on that individual patient and their family's needs in order to provide the care that they need. So it's a job that keeps us all on our toes. It keeps us busy. It keeps us stimulated, motivated, engaged. And so, you know, like some of my colleagues will be like, I can't believe you still are like this excited about your patients and you've been in this job for so long. But I think it's because of the constant like novelty and always like growing and learning and developing along with your patients, right?
And you see the results.
Absolutely.
You can see the results because it's speech therapy. So you see when somebody is succeeding.
Correct.
And their communication skills are changing.
Correct.
And that makes you feel rewarded. How big is your team?
So my team is now 5. I now have 5 speech therapists. So we have 3 who are primarily pediatric and 2 of us who do mixed caseloads, but mainly adults. Yeah.
And I want to ask you this because we do live in the Caribbean, Faith. And I think for me, even for me, worse for my parents, perhaps, but for me, like speech therapy wasn't a thing that was ever brought up at my age.
No.
So what's like some of the common issues that you see with kids today that you can identify?
Yes.
That you need to work with this child?
Yes. And you know what? I can definitely say that needs have changed and intensified over the years, particularly post-COVID.
Do you think because the world's becoming very competitive now, or just because us as kids realize our parents were just too hard on us?
I think it's a combination. I think one is that through increased research and focus on areas of disability and special needs and all of that. I think we have gotten better as a medical community at identifying and diagnosing different developmental and acquired disorders.
Yeah.
So that is one thing. The other thing is, I think that the way that we interact with each other has changed significantly, and not necessarily for the better. And it's interesting because even when I talk to like college friends, or if I go to a conference and talking to people like from the US or Canada or other Caribbean islands, everybody is saying there's definitely been a shift since COVID.
Yeah.
And I think it's just we have progressively gotten away from that community way of which we're raising our children.
Mm-hmm.
We're not doing a lot of grandmas are working still. Grandmas are not home anymore taking care of the kids, and all the cousins are there, and we're all running outside. Go back outside, drink some water and go back outside,
Yeah.
So we're not seeing where children aren't benefiting from that free play and that interperson, communication and relations anymore. And so what we see is a change in developmental disorders as a result of that.
Yeah. Not spending enough time with them. And I know earlier I asked about what's the common issue that you see with young people.
So we see a lot of autism.
Yeah.
We definitely see a lot more autism than we used to. And again, I think one is that when I first came home, you used to have to go to Miami to get a diagnosis for autism.
Yeah.
Now, you can pick and choose which clinic you want to go and get the diagnosis, right? And I think that has, helped. So sorry.
No, you're good.
So we also just see a lot of just language delay, and a lot of it is due to poor interaction opportunities, poor enrichment opportunities. So kids are exposed to a lot of tech.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research coming out, and that's been out, but even more so now, on how dangerous technology can be to the developing brain.
It's so confusing too as a parent. I just sorry I have to cut you there, but it's confusing, and I'm glad that you're bringing this point up, because we get the research that says leave them on it because we have a future that we have to think about, and then we have this other research that comes out that says no, it's actually really dangerous, and it's very confusing as a parent because you're like,
what do I do?
Yeah, because I'm in a season right now, and I say season because I'm growing with my kids, and every year I'm finding out I have to go by their age.
Yes.
So for a long time, I felt like Liam is my oldest boy. I felt like I was still raising the 5-year-old Liam and not the 16-year-old Liam.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's hard. So how do we, now that we know, and you as an expert in this, we know that technology is dangerous.
Yes.
How and why, and how do we get them off?
So I think the what's important is you don't want the TV and when we talk about tech and screens, we mean any screen, a phone, an iPad, a TV. It doesn't matter how quote unquote educational it is. It's programmed to keep your kids hooked. It is. And they modify the programming to keep kids engaged. Yeah. Right. And so what that does is it actually, when you think about a developing brain, and I always like to bring it back to the neuroscience behind it, because as clinicians, we understand it because that's part of our training. But to the average parent, they don't understand. So in their mind, they're thinking, well, Cocomelon's, educational, or Miss Rachel is educational because she's teaching them words and she's teaching them signs, and my baby loves it and they're engaged, but what you don't see is the flip side of that, where a lot of that blue light is activating certain areas of that child's brain. And every single interaction, every single thing your child does, it's creating connections in the brain, right? This is the part between birth and 7 is where a lot of those connections happen. But we know that kids' brains don't fully mature until they're in their 20s. Yeah. Right? But we see a lot of those connections happening. And so when you limit it to a screen with lots of blue light that's flashing, lots of scene changes, lots of things happening, songs and sounds and everything is being bombarded to them. If you actually sit and count every time the scene changes, every time there's a color switch, every time there's like a character that pops up, or, you know, or a switch to panning to this person and that person, it is a lot. And the brain recognizes each of those as a separate interaction, right? And so what you're doing is you're actually like just sitting and pressing on your child's fight or flight part of the brain. Yeah. And we're over stimulating that part, right? And what we're understimulating is the fact that kids are multisensory learners. Mm-hmm. So they're meant to learn and explore through mess and through play and through climbing and, you know, falling down and riding bicycles and, you know, figuring out how things work. Kids are meant to be chaotic and noisy and run up and down. They're not meant to sit still and be glued to a screen, right? And so when we take that play and teaching kids that you pay attention and you persevere and you work on something, and that's how you figure things out. I'm going to sit and figure out how to put together these train tracks together so that I can do my train. Now kids have been conditioned into cause and effect. I press it, it happens immediately. I press it, it happens immediately. So what do we see with our kids now? What we see are kids who cannot wait, who expect to be entertained 100% of the time, who are very bored, get very bored very easily. So we've taken away the opportunity for them to develop imagination and play and that type of creativity, right? Which you as a creative, you know, that's such an important part.
Very important. Like,
right?
I'm just going to tell you that there are people that are cursing at speakers right now because you have just invaded their house.
I'm sorry. But I'm coming with the truth.
Keep coming in.
I'm going to come with the truth, right?
Just want to make sure the house is clean at this moment because you're coming in.
So what we see now are a whole like new generation of kids who we've programmed them to have poor attention spans, poor patience, poor resilience, you know, because they're interacting with a screen, they're not developing that naturalistic communication exchanges. They're developing language where they're imitating only and just like rote learning. So we're not developing those naturalistic communication exchanges where we're having to explain and negotiate and like talk to our friend and say, hey, don't push me, or because we're not having those exchanges anymore, right? And so what you have are like kids who aren't able to advocate for themselves and not able to communicate effectively with others, not able to express their wants and needs, you know. And so because everything is just, every time I cry, I get a screen in front of me. And so like there's safe ways to introduce tech. And I'm definitely not saying take away all technology because that's not realistic for today's day and age, you know, but I think there's safer ways to interact with tech. And I think that, you know, parents really need to know their child and where they're at developmentally and what they're ready for and what they're not ready for. And there's lots of really great developmentally appropriate ways that we can stimulate our child. And I'm coming at it from a language perspective, but I know because I also supervise the occupational therapist, you know, we have kids who have lots of like fine motor issues, kids who are struggling with writing, kids who can't ride bicycles, kids who are struggling with tying their shoes and doing buttons, right? But it's like, if you think about how we used to play as kids, we would dress our dollies and do the buttons on the dollies, and like we would have to string things in and tie things and pull things, and we would be tying rope and tying all kind of, we were building things, you know. And so it's like we, you know, we're robbing our kids from that. And then we've also kind of gotten into where we're just scheduling our kids. So there's not that naturalistic, you know, go knock on the neighbor's door. Hey, can Dane come out to play today? Miss Ramon, please, can Dane come and play? You know, there's none of that. There's none of like, you know, there's none of that picking up the phone and saying, excuse me. You remember we used to have to call our parents and say, excuse me, Miss so-and-so, you know, the receptionist, please can I talk to my mommy today and ask her if I can have some ice cream?
The tasks that we have to go through.
You know, but think about how that has trained us as adults today that we're able to speak on a phone professionally, and we're able to communicate what our wants and our needs and all of those things. And so now we almost like helicopter parents our kids a bit much, so that like everything is scheduled. There's no free play. There's all like, oh, I have violin today, I have basketball tomorrow, I have this, you know. And so I think humans have not evolved that much that we need to go back to the drawing board to figure out how to do development. I think we just need to kind of go back to the basics a bit.
Yeah, just start it.
And just really focus on that interpersonal interactions. And, you know, and if you're not sure about it, like about what I'm saying, like do it to a test. I did this test this week with my husband because my husband is very, very techie.
Yeah.
Right. And he's like, when can we, you know, start to, we have a 9-month-old. So he's like, when is it okay for him? And I'm like, no time soon.
Yeah,
and he's like,
not going to be anytime soon now.
And he's like, no. And I said, okay, let's do an experiment together.
Yeah.
Okay. So I pulled up Mr. Rogers from like 1980, like when we were kids. And it was like so slow. And it's just, you know, Mr. Rogers just putting on
taking his time,
his sweater, and hello friends, how are you today? Let me put on my shoes. You know, he's just taking his time. It's just very, very slow. And you know, he's talking about a goldfish, and the goldfish died, and he buried the goldfish, and you know, the one shape they focused on, and you know, and it was just very slow. So we played it for like 5-10 minutes. My little boy did not even like pay attention to the TV. He was just like, oh.
Wow.
He didn't even, I think it was one time when the trolley like dinged, then he looked at it, right? And then the, you know, the guy that dresses like a dog, he barked and he looked at it. And that was it, right? Then we switched to Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which is very much based on Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
But it's animated, so it's a little bit more pixelated, a little bit more colors, a little bit faster. So Asher started looking at it a little bit more, but he wasn't like glued in, right? Put it on Miss Rachel, and he was like a zombie. And after like 60 seconds, I'm like, okay, I'm done. Like
stuck in it.
And he was just stuck in it. 9 months, right? And it's like, and my husband was like flabbergasted. He was like, oh my gosh, I totally see what you mean now. And I'm like, yes, Miss Rachel's, all she's teaching is sound. She's doing the signs. Is it educational? Absolutely. Do we need to stick him in front of a TV to teach him to say mama and dada? No, because he should be learning that from us through us interacting with him and him learning that reciprocation, right? And so like, I encourage families like challenge yourself to go screen free, to go, you know, or reduce screen time, you know, and see if you see differences, not just in language, but also in behavior, tantrums. You know, like you'll see a huge reduction. Like we've done it with our 12-year-old.
Yeah. You
know, where she's on extremely limited screen time, and when she is on screen time, it's timed, and it's like we've pre-screened the shows. It's not super pixelated. It's very, you know, people are like, you're the mean mom and the strict mom. But like my daughter, like the person she is like completely different. Like we can tell when, you know, she goes to a friend's house and has been like watching too much like Minecraft. It's like she's literally bouncing off the walls, you know? So it, you know. I
mean, I've personally seen what technology has done. Just even in my household, like, you know, like I was speaking, just putting references out there, speaking about my own child. And I realized Liam is a teenager now, but there's times that he calls his sister because he's doing high school in Florida, and he would call his sister and he would say, hey, I'm in the line at Target, right? But I need it now. Like he would always be aggressive. Like I need it now. I'm in the line. And I'm saying to myself, every time it happens, maybe this is because how I grew up, right? Every time it happens, I'm like, step out of the line.
Yeah.
Just wait until it transfers.
Yeah.
But you're used to having things instantly. So
Correct.
it needs to be in seconds.
Correct.
So this just goes by what Faith is, what goes to what Faith is saying. Guys, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to come right back with Faith. This is a wonderful conversation. Hopefully you are tuning in. If you are and you have friends that need to hear the conversation, just go ahead, invite them in. Let them hear us on either our website, which is stingraymedia.com, TuneIn Radio, that's both available on Android. And funny that we're talking about devices now, Androids and iPhone. And you can also tune in live on radio. Just go to your radio dial and listen to us. If you have an old-fashioned one, too, you can tune in. We'll be right back.
The Health Services Authority's new pharmacy is now open at the Smith Road Medical Center. The new location features a large, comfortable waiting area and ticketing system to improve the patient experience. All uncollected prescriptions and refill requests previously submitted will now be available for collection at the Smith Road Pharmacy. Request your refills online at hsa.ky via WhatsApp 925-6534 or call 244-2715. For more information about our pharmacy hours, visit hsa.ky.
And we are back. It's Bobo, 103.1 FM. Back here again for our weekly show with HSA. We are talking to Faith, who runs the speech and language department there in HSA. We've been having a wonderful conversation. We talked about just how harmful devices can be for even communication when it comes to speech and languages and communication, right? For me, I want to test you guys. Next time you do go out to a restaurant, we play this game with our kids, and this is how we get them to get rid of the phone while they're on the table. That's one of my things that I just don't like. I don't like cell phones. I don't like tablets around at the dinner table. And, we've been to restaurants where waiters have come up to us and said, literally, their words that they use, wow, I've been watching you guys from across the room, and you are the only families I've ever seen in a long time that is just talking. You're communicating, you're laughing, you're smiling. Everybody's using their hands. But when you look around the room in the restaurant, and I dare anybody to test it next time you're out, if you look at a table full of a family, somebody's using the phone. If not, the entire table is using the phone. So it's crazy. And I dare to say, I'm no expert. This is why we got Faith in today. That can, especially if there's a child that's dealing with language and speech issues, that delays the process because you're not communicating. You're not learning. Silas, just to be completely transparent, Silas had speech issues. And a lot of the times, he always kind of felt like this is because I'm not smart enough.
Correct.
But then it took, especially going to people like you guys, Faith, at your hospital, that's where we got the healing for him, was he just needed to communicate more.
Yes.
He just needed to practice more.
Yes.
And we were shocked at the process that he's making. Even today, his mom would look at him and she would pronounce certain things and how she would say, roll your tongue, Silas, or say this.
Yes.
And he's still to this day learning it. So your thoughts on just kind of wrap up the whole technology thing, but do you believe that can also be a hinder?
Yes. And I think just in general, and I think that's a nice segue to the next section.
Yeah.
Because, summer is coming up. And so families are going to be on vacation. They're going to be doing things together.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we're not sure what to do with our kids, right? Or maybe you're a family that has kids of very different ages, so you're trying to figure out, how do I do things that are inclusive of all of the kids?
Everyone.
And so one of the things that I always share with families is that you don't need to go to the drawing board. You don't need to get a bunch of extra resources. Instead, what you do is think about what you guys do as a family and make that be how you practice communication, right? So things like cooking and baking.
Yeah.
That it works on following directions. It works on your fine motor skills because you have to do the measurements, right? You're teaching your children how to cook and you're teaching them to be patient that, we're not going to the drive-thru to pick up food. We have to wait for the chicken to cook or the rice to cook or whatever, and let's do it together. And modeling positive eating habits with the kids, right?
And it's an achievement, too, when the food is done.
Absolutely. And then they get to explore the smells and the taste and all of that from that sensory standpoint. But also it's just helping them learn the names of the ingredients. Can you name all these things? If you have an early reader, can you read the label on the things? Can you read the recipe to me if you have an early writer? Can you practice, you know what? We're going to make potato salad today. What are all the things that we need to make potato salad? Here's the pen and paper. I used to do that with my daughter all the time because she is a horrendous speller. And I'm sorry, Alyssa, if you hear mommy today. But she is.
Said with love.
That used to be how we practiced spelling and writing. And so I would be like, okay, I need mayo. I need a bag of potatoes. I need some beets. I need some sweet peppers. I need some onions. And I would like write down, like tell her to write down everything. And then when we're at the supermarket, what do we need? Okay, mommy, you need the potatoes. Mommy, you need this, you need that. And then she'd have to check it off. And it's like, that's just such a simple way to like expose her to the vocabulary. It was such a simple way to get her to practice her reading, to get her to practice her writing, you know, or if you're grocery shopping together, let's do a game. How many vegetables can you name, right? Or like, let's go down the alphabet and find something in the grocery store that begins with the letter A, with the letter B, with the letter C. Oh, I found an apple. I found broccoli. I found corn, you know, and just doing those things to help build vocabulary when you have a preschooler. And then as they're older, you can kind of include them in the process more. So it's not about them sitting in the cart on their phone. It's about them being a part of the process of shopping for the family, because that's something that we all have to do every week, right?
Absolutely. I love that, Faith. That's some really good activities, and cooking it's a really good. And if you make it a competition too, I've done that before. Where I've said, okay, you know what, you know, me and Silas are going to do this, and Sarai and Mom are going to do this, and we're going to go against each of them, right?
Correct.
And they find it to be fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Kids want to be included in our everyday activities. A nice like conversation starter for a family. I mean, you can even like do like a picker wheel. Like I have a picker wheel app on my phone. So like we'll say, okay, what are we going to cook this weekend for Sunday dinner? And I click the wheel and it'll be like Cayman style beef. All right, let's do the grocery list. Let's do this together. Let's do, you know, but even just like conversation starters, like things like, I used to do I still do it with my daughter, but I'm looking forward now to doing it with my son. But we used to talk about our peach and our pit. So like what was like the sweetest part of our day and what was like the roughest part of our day. And it's like, so if you start that when your child is young, it also helps you to maintain that close connection with your child when they're older, when you want them to talk to you. So now I have a daughter who's like at John Gray High School. Mind blown. I can't believe that. And it's like, and you know, she's in WH just like I was. I'm like, So
it's dolphin for me. But I'm still gonna support you with that.
But it's like, you know, it was just so nice. And initially she was like, Mom, but like now she's like, oh my gosh, Mom, as soon as I walk in the door, Mom, let me tell you what happened. Oh my goodness, this happened with this one and this happened with that one. And in this class, this happened. And I'm like, okay. Because it's like you want your children who are preteens and teens to come and talk to you about their day and feel like it's a safe space for them to communicate. And so I think like starting very young, a lot of times I think parents think it's like I have to sit down and do flashcards, or like I have to make it like a whole separate thing. But like, even if like with my son's age now at 9 months, like every time we do a bath, we talk about body parts. Every time, you know, we're changing clothes. Okay, we're going to put on your pants now. We're going to put on your shirt now. Okay, what's next? Let's grab the brush. He doesn't know, but I'm modeling that for him, right? And it's just using our everyday routines. We're going outside. What do we see? Oh, we see some chickens. Let's get some bread and throw for the chickens, you know, and it's just about being that narrator and just talking about everything to your child and exposing them to those sounds, you know, and exposing them to those words. And then when you start to hear them start to make those sounds, you play back and forth. Like right now, my son likes the chicken, and when we do cock-a-doodle-doo, and he goes, right? And he thinks it's like the funniest thing in the world. So then we go back, you know, and we make that sound back to him. And then he's looking at us and he's smiling. He goes, and it's back and forth like that, like 10 times. But it's fine because it's teaching him that it's you talk, I talk. You talk, I talk, right? And so just from that foundational level, it's just you just make it a part of your everyday routine, all the things that you're doing. But if you're thinking about like, what do I do with my kids over the summer? That, you know, your kids are going to be home, they're going to be on break. What do I do? And a lot of times parents are like, oh, I need to, you know, summer camp in the morning and music class in the afternoon. Like, honestly, it's okay to give your kids a break. If they need the break, it's okay to give them the break, you know, but there's things, if you're thinking about doing things for your children in the summer, think about things that are going to develop their communication skills. So if they're going to a camp or they're going to, is that an opportunity where they can develop those social communication things with their peers, where they have to negotiate and, describe? Think about, is it something that they're going to follow directions, that they have to, learn those commands and learn how to follow those directions, and that understanding of what that direction is asking me to do.
Yeah.
And am I able to remember the direction? Am I able to do it? And if that's something that you notice that your child is struggling with, maybe kind of do a little self-sabotage with them at home, right? I'm going to hide the remote. Where's the remote? Oh, the remote is, behind the door in the master bedroom. So now I need to remember all of those different information carrying words so that I can find something that I really want, right? So it's like developing that receptive language in that way.
So many things to think about that you just didn't know.
Absolutely. You were talking about a puzzle. Puzzle is great because it's like as the puzzle is coming together, they can use like negotiation. I'm looking for a blue piece for this section.
Yeah.
Right? Or like, I can see that the tiger is coming up on this section. So they can talk about describing those things, doing things like arts and crafts, literally just buying your kids stacks of paper, paint, crayons, and let them create things and tell a story, right? What's a story? Do the pictures of a book.
Yeah.
Today, paint all the pictures of a book, put it together, and you don't even need to put words. Just tell me the story.
Yeah.
Just tell me the story from your imagination, from beginning to end, right? Do nature walks with your children. Have them go outside and say, what animals did you see? What bugs did you see? What sounds did they make? And, what did you see that surprised you?
Yeah.
What did you see that made you feel relaxed? And talk about your feelings and how those things make us feel. We talked about having them tell stories, but also you reading with them. Like the library always does a really good summer reading program where kids can earn points and get prizes, like for just participating in their reading summer program. And you don't have to spend a dime. You just have to get a library card.
That's it.
And that's it. Your child has like reading entertainment, and have them, why don't you tell me about the 3 chapters you read today? Give me a synopsis, right?
Yeah.
If it's an older child, like you could have them write you a book report if you want to, if you're that type of parent. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like if you want to give them something to practice the reading and writing, you can do that. If it's a younger child, have them retell you the story. I'm going to tell you the story. Now you tell me the story.
Yeah.
Or practice some of those like early literacy skills, like what do you think is going to happen next? And then ask them, well, how do you think that character felt?
Yeah.
And why would they feel like that? And if you felt like that, what would you do? Right? And it's really just kind of pulling those things naturalistically out of your child. And those are just things that are just part of our everyday conversation. But those are the things that we're seeing kids coming into the clinic struggling with. And so it's not for just the typical language developmental concerns. They're all things that are preventable and are easily treated with the right engagement.
And that leads me, before we take a quick break, Faith, that leads me to my question before the break. What would make you say, as a parent that's listening right now, you perhaps need to think about taking your child to me?
So for younger children, we are really concerned when we're not seeing any language, when you're not seeing that they're responding to their name, when you see that they're not able to follow directions, they're not able to identify, their body parts, where you see that they're using more gestures or more behaviors. That's usually a big red flag when kids are becoming more emotional versus communicating.
Yeah.
And so they're communicating through their emotionality, where they're just having breakdowns and crying and throwing tantrums, and they're just pointing and they're not really able to express themselves. If it's an older child, maybe they're just only speaking in single words and they're not putting those words together.
Yeah.
But if you have any concerns at all, bring them to come and see us. I'd rather assess a child and tell you they're okay and just give you some strategies than tell you to wait, and then 6 months down the road, we realize that your child has big delays, right?
Yeah.
So, but those are some of the red flags that we are concerned about. And if it's something like, autism or neurodevelopmental disorder, then we really work closely with the family through the whole diagnostic process, as well as like with treatment post diagnosis. And we just really focus on neurodiversity affirming approaches with that population. So we're looking at what type of language learner are you? Because we know that not every child, but many children who present with autism or other type of neurodiversity diagnoses are what we call Gestalt language processors, meaning that I learn language through rote memorization as opposed to in little chunks. So your typical developing child with language, they start with sounds, then, syllables, and then like single words, and it goes, 2 words, and it kind of goes up like that.
Yeah.
For children who are Gestalt language processors, they tend to learn language in chunks. Now, not every child who is a Gestalt language processor or GLP has autism, and not every child who has autism learns language in that way.
Okay.
But what we know is that it just happens to be that a significant percentage of children with autism have a tendency to learn in that way. And so with that approach, we're learning, like I said, in big chunks. And we have to kind of do a little bit of detective work to see what are some of those chunks mean. So for example, one that always stands out to me is I had a little one who used to always say, keys, please, but he meant open, right? Because he had associated open with the keys.
Yeah.
So he used to always say, keys, please, but what he meant was open. So even if we were just had something like, say, in a Tupperware container, he would say, keys, please, and he meant open, right? So it was knowing that when he said that, that's what he meant, and working with him to
change it.
To break down those gestalts and then build back up his language. And so, and our team are all very well versed in that approach on supporting kids with that type of language. We take a slightly different approach in terms of that we really try to focus on the quality of input. I think a lot of times families get fixated on quantity of sessions. Mm-hmm. So sometimes they get a bit nervous when we say, just once a week or just twice a week. And because when they get that diagnosis, it's so scary and it's so emotional for families to go through that process of getting diagnosed for anything, right? And so a lot of times, this narrative of more is better is often pushed. And actually, there's a huge amount of research that has come out that actually says, no, it's not about more, it's about high quality. Yeah. And so making sure that the interactions that you are getting in therapy, that one, we're getting families engaged, that we're modeling, because you are with your child more than anybody else, right? So it's making sure that you are empowered, that you understand how to, do that carryover at home, and making sure that our goals are high quality goals, they're patient-centered goals, they're culturally responsive, and they also are measurable in that we are helping that child get success, right? And so when you see in a short period of time, we start to see significant gains. And a lot of times, the gains may not necessarily be noticeable to someone who's not familiar with your child. Mm-hmm. But I know, for example, like the other day, there was a kid in the waiting room waiting, and I just kept looking, and I was like, oh my gosh, because typically this is a child who just was really difficult to engage with, and to see him sitting and playing and using his device to talk to the therapist, saying, hi, Miss So-and-so. And it was it just seemed so simple, to someone who didn't see where that child was, but to see how in just 3 months, the changes, I was like, wow, that's so big to see that child is now starting to engage and initiate that conversation, and that it's being done in such a naturalistic way. Yeah. It's so rewarding to see, the growth of the kids that are coming to the clinic.
And that's the part that keeps you excited. That's what I was going to say. That's the exciting part there.
Absolutely.
We're going to be right back. We're going to be wrapping things up very soon. This has been a great, great, great talk. What I want to discuss in the last couple of minutes that we have is obviously we've been talking about the kids, but what about the adults, right? And obviously we'll wrap it up there, because if you are someone that's struggling, maybe because I said before, you could never have these conversations with your parents before. It was a different time back then. Is there help? Is there a way for you to still be involved, to still get help in areas like this? So we want to kind of wrap it up that way. And anything else Faith wants to add before she leaves, this will be the time. Thank you so much for tuning in to Bobo 103.1. We'll be back in just minutes.
When you have a sports or fitness-related injury, trust the expertise of the HSA Sports and Exercise Medicine Clinic to get you back in the game. Our internationally trained and certified physicians specialize in sports traumatology, sports medicine, pain management, and orthopedic surgery. For treatment of common injuries such as tendonitis, arthritis, tennis elbow, rotator cuff, or knee tears, schedule a consultation with the Sports and Exercise Medicine Clinic at Smith Road Medical Center by calling 949-8600 or visit hsa.ky for more information.
All right, we are back on Bobo 103.1 FM. I am your host, Dane, and it's a pleasure to have Faith here from HSA, who is head of the speech language. What's the department referred to as?
So we're under the umbrella of therapy services.
Yes.
But I'm the team lead for speech and occupational therapies.
Love it. Love it. And you've been there for 17 years.
Correct.
It's been a long time.
I
Faith.
know. But I'm still young.
You are very much. That's why I'm shocked when you said you've been there that long. I would have never guessed that, because when we look at Faith, we always think that, okay, this is new to her. This is still new.
Yeah.
But it's not. You're becoming an expert.
I tell people, like, I remember when we had a person who joined the team. She was a new member, and she was just like, "Can I ask you a question?" I was like, "Sure, you can ask me anything." And she's like, "How old are you?" Because, like,
you don't age.
I think you sound like you've been a therapist for a long time. Yeah. And I'm like, it's like, I'm older than you think. But it's okay. It's okay.
Do you still get card? Page?
No.
I mean, sorry, Faith. Sorry.
No. I don't get carded.
Oh, my goodness. It's crazy because my daughter still does, and she's in that 20 gap right now, like 24. And I just remember her just recently, somebody looked at her, and she hated to be carded, right? And somebody looked at her recently now and said, "Happy Mother's Day." And that broke her world.
Oh, no.
But I said, you hated to be called young. Look, somebody's finally calling you a mama. To be happy about it. Anyway, what I want to kind of wrap up with, we've been having a wonderful conversation about speech therapy, communication, and just even going deeper into just how to be a better family with your kids and communicate better in the household. It's been such a rewarding conversation. But what I want to touch on now is people like me, my age, maybe even in their 20s, maybe in their teens, that are struggling with language. There are kids now that I dare to say, even adults like me, that are sitting down and they're saying, I'm just not that smart enough because there's certain things I can't say and I can't do it. Something is wrong with me. And you're judging yourself harshly, and there's help for that.
Yes.
You don't have to put a title on yourself to say, I'm stupid.
Well, I wouldn't say that anybody is stupid, because a lot of times people who have communication disorders, there's nothing wrong with them cognitively. Yeah. So a lot of times it's just either a motor issue. And, like you mentioned earlier, when we were growing up, these things were not as readily available as they are now, So there is help available for adults if they need it. And I would just say talk with your GP. We do need a physician referral for any of our services, pediatric or adult. But some of the things that we typically see adults for is if there's any like residual speech sound disorders, or maybe like a stutter from childhood and you never had an opportunity to work on it, and it's something that's important for you to work on, that you would like to work on, then we're happy to support you with that. We do see a lot of persons with voice disorders. So whether it's like chronic hoarseness, vocal nodules, tension, dysphonia, or like muscle tension. Sometimes people with chronic reflux, because that acid is coming up and damaging those vocal cords. So we do provide a lot of support for voice, and typically people like yourself who use their voices a lot, or like teachers, so again, talk to your doctor, explain your concerns, and just see if speech therapy can help you. Sometimes there may be cognitive linguistic things. Maybe you're noticing my memory isn't as sharp as it used to be. I feel like it's taking me additional time to process. Maybe, I always had this issue, but now that I'm getting older, I'm finding listening and hearing to be harder. I always say check with the audiologist first to make sure that you don't have any hearing loss, because we are seeing a lot more hearing loss due to people using, AirPods, earphones, blasting music, our club days from when we were younger. It damages those. Let's
talk about it.
Yeah, those hair cells in our ears. And so, and that is a part of aging too, is that, with that and our processing speed maybe slows down a little bit. And if you feel like it's impacting your day-to-day interactions, again, you can come and talk to someone, or if you have something acquired. So maybe you have a cancer diagnosis, maybe you've had a stroke, a head injury, brain surgery, then we're here to help.
I love it, man. For me, it's always been my TH.
Excuse me.
And even saying simple things to this day, because I never got it taken care of. And even working in media, so I like to talk to a lot of young people. It's like, I would say, like, there's a tree outside, obviously, but then there's a number.
Well,
and
I will speak to that.
Yes.
That's actually part of our Cayman dialect. And so there's nothing wrong with talking in the Cayman dialect.
But
and
people make it out to be like
people make it out to be, but it's not.
Yes.
And actually, in the world of speech therapy, it is actually ethically wrong to work on somebody's dialect and their cultural accent unless they have indicated that they need to work on it. And so we actually have a wonderful chart that we've developed that are speech sound disorders, or speech differences, I should say, not speech sound disorders. So articulation differences that are consistent with the Cayman dialect, as well as the actual grammatical differences that are consistent with the Cayman dialect. So, so when we assess your child for language disorders, and if your child is a Cayman child, and we see those differences, we'll say, hey, we see these differences. It's not a disorder, it's your dialect. So we're actually able to differentiate between what is dialect and what is disorder. And that's hard to do if you don't know the Cayman dialect. And a lot of the dialectal differences that you see in the Cayman dialect are very consistent in some of the Creole and the Patois and the other Caribbean dialects. And so I have really good relationships with the Caribbean Speech Hearing Association. I was one of the founders. So I have good relationships with therapists and communities across the region. And so sometimes I might say, hey, I have a kid and their parents are from Trinidad. I notice XYZ. I just want to double check. Is this consistent with your dialect up there? Because they have similar charts and things that they have done to modify, and make sure that we aren't misdiagnosing. And that has something that has actually been a big thing in the world of speech therapy. And that's something I'm really proud about, that our team, that we're able to differentiate between the cultural differences and actual true disorders. Because what you see in communities is most of the assessments that are used are standardized in middle class Caucasian neighborhoods, which that does not reflect our everyday society and the mosaic that our society is. And so it's really important when you are seeking a therapist that you have someone who's aware. And this doesn't just happen in Cayman.
Yeah.
This happens even in the US, in Canada, in the UK, and so there's been a huge push for more culturally responsive care, and to make sure that we are, because there's been a lot of research that shows that children of color are disproportionately diagnosed with language disorders, with learning disorders, with ADHD, with a lot of disorders, because they were not normed. They weren't included on the norms for some of those assessments. So it's really important that you factor in that family's culture and their heritage and all of those things to make sure that we're not diagnosing a cultural difference.
I absolutely enjoyed this conversation for many reasons, and I hope that is something that's continuously pushed, because you're right. I meet people from, I'm lucky enough to be around so many different cultures, and I've seen people from Africa. I've seen people from Australia that have a complete different way of saying things. So people usually sometimes don't tend to say, okay, well, they have a speech problem. But for some reason, I think because the Cayman accent is so special.
It is.
It is really one of the most unique dialect out there.
And the thing is that it's not even as unique as it used to be.
Yeah.
Because I think when our parents were growing up, even district to district, you would hear differences. And there used to be a little ditty, and I forgot it. And there's a retired nurse who knew it, that an old, back when they just had the one doctor.
Yeah.
And he actually made a little ditty about the different districts, and so how he could tell, and he would imitate how they said it, and this district speaks like this, and then in the middle was Bordentown. I remember that. And then so I need to record her saying it so I can remember, just for posterity, you know. But if you think about the recordings of Aunt Julia Hyde's, like that West Bay, they used to talk about that the Bior, the chore, right? We used to fjore our parents, like you hear her say that, and that was like something that was very, West Bay, and the W's for the V's.
Yeah.
Right? So I have elderly patients who are from West Bay who will say we're talking about something, and we're talking about gardening, and she's like, well, they don't grow on trees, tomatoes and cucumbers, they grow on wine, and it's like, for someone, so it's just those little cultural differences that I think make such a difference, or say if you're doing naming, tell me some cakes, right? And Caymanians are going to tell you yam, sweet potato, cassava, breadfruit. Yeah. You would be like, no, those are vegetables, but no, those are cakes for Caymanians, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like those little cultural differences that just make all the difference with the connection and the personalization with how we approach our patients.
Perfect way to wrap up the show, and I'm just so glad that we touched on that, because that's so important, and it's a wonderful way to end. So, Faith, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
And if anybody has any questions about speech therapy, if you just want to chat, if you just want to bounce ideas, share, we're happy. One of the team would be happy to reach out to you, touch base with you, see how we can support you. You can email us at speechtherapy@hsa.ky, or you can call us at 244-2733.
Perfect. Say the email one more time, please.
Speech therapy, all one word, at hsa.ky.
Love it. Thank you so much, Faith.
Thank you.